Greets everybody. Today we're going to be looking at a TvT between Innovation versus Cure from the GSL. Dun 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 dun. I decided why not do it if the GSL people don't like it. Well, then they can go play Hearthstone. Lol. So, which one is this one? Yeah. Alright, so Innovation versus Cure. And the goal of today, or this video, is not, in fact, TVZ like this poster says, but it's going to be examining a look at innovation using the new Age Mech style that Flash has recently shown in his resurgence as God. Greatest of all time. Nope. God. So, Innovation is the blue player spawning at the 6 o'clock position, and Cure is the red player spawning at the 3 o'clock position. And I believe, I haven't watched the entire series yet, but I will eventually do it, and I think I'm going to make a video about all of the games played and release them throughout the week. But I believe, from what I've heard from the my StarCraft sources in the industry, that Innovation mechs every single game and Cure does a biotank every single game. So it's going to be pretty cool to watch how Innovation is able to adapt his mech play style to all of the different maps. And this is a best of 7 too, so it's going to be a bit iffy going mech on every single map, like Catalina, King Sejong Station, even Overgrowth. They're kind of meh mech maps compared to Merry-Go-Round, Nimbus, Deadwing. Those are very, very good mech maps. One thing I want to note here in the beginning part of the game before I go too much off topic is that Innovation is copying Flash's mech opener by getting that Reaper Scout and getting his orbital an extra SCV late. So at about, I think 18, he gets his orbital, and then he gets a Reaper, a depot, and then a refinery. I will link a build order at the bottom and a game of where I cover Flash doing this in his TvT if you guys are interested in checking that out. But this is pretty much the identical build. There are slight variations that Innovation does that for whatever reason I think he's just more comfortable doing, and that he has his own macro style that he adheres to. So he's not going to copy exactly everything that Flash does, although both of them are macro monsters in their own sense. We see here the Viking coming out for Innovation. Innovation starting that Viking before putting it on that tech lab because that Hellion ran by. If he tried to land the tech lab, that Hellion could have blocked it for a little bit and delayed that Viking. And getting that Viking out is very important to stop the first Banshee from coming by. On this map, I'm going to pause the VOD for a little bit so I can illustrate a point with my handy cursor. If you take the Watchtower with either the Reaper, the Marine, or the Hellion, you'll have vision of this entire area. If you put a Hellion over here and then another Hellion over here, so let's say he has a Reaper and 2 Hellions, which he does right now, and he doesn't lose anyone he pokes in, which he shouldn't because there's a Rax factory wall. If you have the Hellion right here, the second Hellion right outside the Watchtower, and then the third Reaper over here, you'll have an entire area of vision right here to possibly intercept the Banshee with your Viking. And if you can do that, you're going to be pretty far ahead in the early game. Although Cure is not going for Cloak, so he's not going to be 100% behind. We see the Banshee coming out now. And we see the Raven started as per usual, and Innovation's going to start his command center on the low ground because he can. This Banshee is taking the long way around. It's going to go all the way across the map. Innovation, he tried to intercept it with the Viking, as we see on the minimap, and we see that Watchtower being taken to make sure that Banshee doesn't go through the Watchtower, because if it does, then it's essentially a free kill. That's why Cure is sending it all the way along the border. And he didn't make Cloak with it. Cure is actually doing Bomber's build. I would like to cover that through the replay, but Blizzard refuses to let us watch past replays in favor of stronger team colors. So what can I do, really? Let's see. Engineering bay going down. You can delay the engineering bay usually if you don't open up or if your opponent doesn't open up for a Banshee, we see Innovation trying to look for that Banshee. It's always important to try to look for that Banshee, and more importantly, do things with your units when they're not doing any, or when they otherwise would be doing nothing. Like, he could be idling his units with the rest of his units, like right here in between both of his bases in defensive position, but he decides to just poke over here to check for the Banshee. Just a little thing that he does that separates the Code A players from the Code S, the best players from the very best. We see here turret going down, and one thing that Innovation didn't do is that he didn't start the third third refinery. Flash generally starts it when the command center is 90% done. Innovation decides not to. Just a little small variation we see here. He is floating a lot of gas, but I think you should start that third refinery, and it's just a mistake on Innovation's part, because you mine gas a lot slower, and it's better to have it stockpiled. Especially since you're making siege tanks, you're making double Vikings if you need to. There's just a lot of stuff that gas can be used for. We see Innovation getting the gas now, but it's like 30 seconds slower than it should have been. No biggie, I guess. We see him getting the armory as well. That armory is not so much defensive armory, but more of a standard when you're going to get your upgrades type of armory. Normally, if you don't see the natural base landing, and you know that it's going to be a Marine tank push because you kind of scouted your opponent in some way with the Reaper, with the Hellions, or something, then you should get the armory a little bit earlier so that you can have those Hellbats ready, because Hellbats really shut down any early one base Marine tank pushes, or like one base expand Marine tank pushes. We see Innovation piling up his Viking count. This is a very defensive stance that he's taking, and then we see him start his third command center and then his +1 vehicle weapons. I would say that you should start your third command center before your +1 attack, before your third factory, and before your fourth gas. Those should all start immediately after your third command center starts, though. You just want to get your third command center at around the 10-minute timing. Innovation started his about 10:08. When I do this build, I usually get it from anywhere like from 10 minutes to 10:30, depending on how my macro is going, if any harassment has been done. But you want to get it before 11 minutes, but not before 10, basically. We see here Innovation going for Hellbats and Medivacs. This unit composition has proven very, very strong. We saw Bomber showcase it at Red Bull Washington against Cure in a couple games, I believe. At least one. I know he did it on Nimbus. And it worked wonders against the Biotank army, because those Hellbats getting dropped, they do insane amounts of damage to the Bioforce. So far, Innovation hasn't scouted what Cure has been doing. I think he should have tried to send his Reaper in and gotten a little bit more information about what was going on. He did see the Banshee earlier on, so he kind of has a good idea of what's going on, but he doesn't know if Kira is taking on third base or not, so Innovation has to play very, very defensive at this point. I also would like to see a sensor tower go up sooner rather than later, because you need that sensor tower. Innovation does get the sensor tower this game, but you do need that sensor tower as soon as possible to secure your third base and to have your army in position. Because as a mech player, if your army's at the third base and he goes into your natural, you're screwed. If your army's at the natural and it goes into your third base, you're screwed. Basically, you need your army to be where his army is as well. That's why we see Innovation not sieging his units as well. His sensor tower is a little bit off. I'd like to see it a little bit closer, like here-ish. But having the sensor tower here, I guess, makes it a lot harder for Cure to be able to drop into Innovation's main. We see Innovation skimping on the turrets as well, mostly because he has the Vikings, he has Medivacs, so he's pretty good against any kind of doom drops for this point, because he has the tools, he has the mobility and the tools to deal with it. We see Innovation adding one factory. Nope, not one factory. You generally want to add one factory at a time. You'll see Flash do it in the VOD I link below. Innovation not doing it 100% as Flash would do it. I think it's just because lack of practice or whatever reason, neglecting details. We see at 14 minutes into the game, both players are about maxed out. Kier taking a lot of siege tank hits, and these Hellbats just completely destroy the army of Kier. Kier just was in a really bad position. He might not have known that the Hellbats were in the medvacs, but either way, it wasn't a good idea for him to really siege up. He wasn't threatening the third base. He wasn't really doing anything other than getting into an in-your-face position without actually causing any need for just any real reason for Innovation to feel afraid, because he wasn't close enough to the third to siege it. He wasn't setting up a second pronged attack of any sorts. And as a result, Innovation is just able to clamp over Kier's army and secure the easy win. Spoiler alert, he wins this game. But I just want to go back to some macro aspects that are happening during the game that might otherwise get glossed over. Because this was a pretty straightforward game. Essentially, both players went for a fast third command center. They sieged up. Kier was caught out of position, and as a result, he lost a lot of his army to the medevacs. You can also be aggressive with that as well if you're ahead, or if you're trying to attack when you're maxed out. You can siege up and then drop your medevacs on top of the biotank army, and it makes it extremely hard to for the biotank player to stop, because he just doesn't really have any way to shoot down the Hellbats coming out of the sky fast enough without them doing critical damage to the marine count and then the friendly fire, etc., etc. Yeah, so this is about the time when the third bases are coming down. I just want to go over this really quickly. We're not even going to finish the end of it, because this is the important step before the battle happens. Both players are securing the thirds. That's the important thing in mind here. Notice how Innovation hasn't done any Hellbat drops either. That option is available if you know what your opponent is doing, but Innovation did not know what his opponent was doing. So that's why he had to play defensive with the medevacs rather than aggressive. If he had scouted the third command center, he would have known that Kier wouldn't have been pushing out at this time. This is a pretty standard push out time for a stim biotank army with your first two medevacs, and if you have only two bases, then things can get aggressive really fast, so that's why Innovation chooses not to drop. But if you do scout the third command center of your opponent and you do ID his build that he's going biotank, definitely feel free to send two Hellbat drops, one to the natural, one to the main. You don't want to send more than two Hellbat drops though, because that will impact your army size, and if you don't do enough damage, and even if you do, if you don't buy enough time with your drops so that you can take a lead and regain your army size back to where it was, then you're gonna lose the game. So it's very important not to over Hellbat drop harass. A couple other ideas could be sending a couple Hellions over this way to the third base, just poke in, see if there's a bunker, see if there's any units there. At best, get a couple SCV kills. At worst, just scout out the third base timing. It's not really a bad idea to do. I do that in a lot of my games, so that's why I suggest it. And yeah, so I guess the other thing to note is that Innovation, after making 4 Vikings, so he made 2 Vikings and a Raven out of his starport with the Tech Lab, and then he switched the racks onto the starport. He made 2 more Vikings before starting medevac production, and he made 3 pairs of medevacs in quick succession. He also has 23 Hellbats and only 5 tanks. Like, the biotank player has more tanks than Innovation does. That's okay, I guess. I think Innovation actually does he. Yeah. So what he does is he adds a second reactor onto. Yeah, I'm not crazy. He adds a second reactor onto his third factory. Yep. There we go. Let me just point. That's an important fact that I could have otherwise missed if I hadn't gone back. Now I have to scroll through. All right. So I have to wait to get a shot of that. It's really annoying not having the replay. Okay. So right here we see that the Rax is building a reactor. So Innovation isn't building a tech lab, he's actually building a second reactor before building his second tech lab. So that's why he has so many Hellbats, and that's why he's also it's kind of like what Bomber did at Red Bull. He ended up having 6 factories on the Nimbus game against Cure, and he had 3 reactors, so he was making 6 Hellbats at a time. It's a good way to spend your minerals if you're floating money. Of course, you can fix that by taking your gas slightly faster. Siege tanks are always good to have, but it's a lot more defensive. Hellbats are a lot more mobile, so that's why Innovation chooses to go for it. But yeah, so his third factory, that is actually a reactor on it, building with the racks instead of a tech lab. So that's why Innovation ends up having so many Hellbats and so few tanks, because he's only making 1 tank at a time. And if we go to about the 15-minute mark, that's like tanks take 45 seconds to build. So fast forward like 3 minutes, and that's only like 3-4 siege tanks max. Let's go back. Yeah, so that's why he doesn't have that many siege tanks. Cure's in this battle, Cure's siege tanks are also very out of position. And what I mean by out of position is that they are not doing anything except for attacking. So if we see where both players siege up, you'll see that Cure's siege tanks siege out of range of Innovation siege tanks. Both siege tanks are out of range, but when Innovation drops on Cure's army, those Cure's siege tanks start working against him. So they're doing friendly fire damage to Cure's army instead of attacking Innovation's units. So these Hellbat drops are really a double-edged sword against Cure's army and just the positioning of his units. And we notice how Innovation, he doesn't even have very many siege tanks. Well, okay, another thing that he does, Cure, like, these siege tanks are slightly out of range of Innovation siege tanks right here, but Innovation siege tanks are right in range. So all of these bio units are getting bombarded by Innovation siege tanks, and Cure siege tanks are just hitting Hellbats, which is not what you want to be hitting. And they're hitting Hellbats that are being dropped on top of his own units. Definitely not units that you want to be hitting. So that's why this battle went so poorly for Cure. It's because these entire units were just caught in Innovation's crosshair. Like, see, they're getting hit right now, and then they stim forward, and they get hit by the siege tanks, and they're only doing damage to the Hellbats, and they get absolutely obliterated. It really was a bad engagement by Cure, and it's really hard to judge, especially if you don't have a lot of practice playing against this type of style. But yeah, that's pretty much the main reasons why Cure lost this game, and I just wanted to go over them and make sure I didn't miss anything. So that pretty much brings the end to this first game. We're going to be taking a look at the rest of the series throughout the week, so stay tuned, and I will see you guys in the next video.